Heaven's transmission was interrupted 3 times, but God has now opened the gate. Let them see it. He said, "This message belongs to you and no one else. Open this with your heart prepared. The sound of heaven is not a sound made by the mouths of men. It is not a whisper of the wind, nor the echo of thunder. It is the vibration of eternity itself, the pulse of God's voice that shakes the unseen realms. There was a message once meant for you, sealed in the courts of light." 3 times it tried to reach you, and 3 times it was resisted not by distance, but by the weight of distraction, doubt, and delay. But now the seal is broken, the gate stands open, the command has been spoken from the throne, let them see it. You are hearing this not by accident, but by appointment, for there are no accidents in heaven's timing. The Eternal has chosen this moment to reveal what was hidden, to awaken what was sleeping, to summon what was silent in you. The words that are about to pass through you are not of dust and flesh, they are of fire and spirit. Prepare your heart, for what heaven begins, no power on earth or beneath it can halt. 3 times the message was intercepted. The first time it was drowned by the noise of the world, the endless clamor of voices that told you who you should be, what you should chase, and what you should fear. The truth was there, but the storm was louder. The frequency of heaven could not cut through the volume of human worry. You were surrounded by movement, yet you stood still, waiting for peace that could not be found in the noise. The second interruption came from within. The message approached, but doubt raised its wall. You questioned your worth, your purpose, your place in God's design. You said, "Surely, this word is not for me." You wrapped yourself in unworthiness and called it humility. But heaven does not speak to the proud or the timid, it speaks to the chosen. You were chosen, and still you hid from the call, believing that divine messages are only for saints, not for souls who stumble. But hear me, every trembling heart that still beats for righteousness is a vessel fit for divine truth. The third interruption came from darkness itself. There was resistance, a battle not of flesh, but of spirit. The air thickened, the signal wavered, the shadows tried to silence what was meant for your deliverance. Yet by divine decree the command broke through, opened the gate, and heaven obeyed. Now the transmission flows unbroken. The veil is thin. The glory that once seemed distant now surrounds you. The light that once felt unreachable now presses against your spirit, calling, stirring, urging you to awaken. The gate is not in the sky, it is in your heart. And when your heart opens, heaven floods in. This message, yes, this very one belongs to you and no one else. It has your name woven into its sound. Before your first breath, it was written in the book of life beside your destiny. Every tear you have cried, every silence you have endured, every moment you have wondered if heaven remembers your name, it was all leading to this moment. You are not forgotten. You are not unseen. You are not unworthy. You are the reason the gate has opened today. Listen, heaven is not a faraway kingdom surrounded by clouds and golden walls. Heaven is a living current flowing through time and eternity, reaching into the hearts of those who will receive. When God says, "Let them see it," He is not showing you a vision to admire, He is unveiling a truth to live. What you are about to see is not an image, but an awakening. It is the unveiling of what has always been yours, the authority, the peace, the promise, the inheritance that no hand of darkness can steal. You were meant to stand between heaven and earth not as a wanderer, but as a vessel of divine will. The world may call you ordinary, but the record of heaven calls you appointed. The fire you feel stirring within is not emotion, it is assignment. You are being summoned to align, to rise, to reclaim the message that was delayed but never denied. There is a sound echoing now in the Spirit, the same sound that rolled across creation when God said, "Let there be light." That sound is speaking again, and it says, "Let them see it." See what? See what heaven sees, the glory hidden in the ashes, the purpose hidden in the pain, the destiny hidden in the delay. The interruptions were not failures, they were tests of endurance. Heaven waited for the moment your heart would be ready to hear without fear, to see without doubt, to receive without resistance. That moment is now, so open your heart. Remove the armor of yesterday's disappointments. Lay down the weapons of self-condemnation. Step into the light that is calling your name. The message is no longer being transmitted through barriers or signs, it is flowing directly into your soul. You are being restored, recalibrated, reawakened. The connection is clear, the gate is open, and heaven waits not for you to strive, but to receive. Hear it one last time. This message belongs to you and no one else. It carries your name, your story, your redemption. The Eternal has spoken. Let them see it. The voice of heaven is not a vibration carried on the wind, nor a sound that can be captured by human ears. It is a frequency beyond time, a living resonance that flows from the throne of God Himself. When heaven speaks, creation responds. Mountains tremble, seas grow still, and the invisible realms shift under the authority of divine utterance. Yet there are moments in the flow of eternity when that voice is not easily heard. It is not that God has stopped speaking, it is that the world has grown too loud. The heart of man, designed to hear heaven's tone, becomes crowded with the static of survival, ambition, fear, and desire. But when God chooses to speak again, when He commands heaven's message to be restored, the silence of the Spirit is shattered, and something eternal begins to stir within the human soul. The restoration of heaven's voice is not a moment of mere inspiration. It is a spiritual alignment. For too long, humanity has moved under the illusion of separation, as though the Creator and the creation were worlds apart. But heaven was never closed, it was only obscured by the fog of unbelief. When the divine message returns, when heaven's frequency is restored, it does not enter the world as a whisper to the few, but as a summons to the chosen. You feel it not in your ears, but in your spirit. It calls not to your emotions, but to your purpose. It carries a weight, a pull, a sacred vibration that awakens what was dormant and forgotten inside of you. There is something deeply personal about heaven's restored voice. It does not speak in generalities or vague comfort. It speaks to the very marrow of your being, cutting through the noise of your thoughts, bypassing the pride of intellect, and reaching straight into the center of who you truly are. It calls you by name, not the name given by men, but the name written in light, known only by God. That is the name heaven uses when it calls. The moment that sound reaches your soul, everything begins to align, not because you suddenly understand, but because something eternal recognizes the sound of its origin. When heaven's transmission returns, the heart begins to remember. You remember what the world tried to make you forget, that you were not created by accident, that your breath is not meaningless, that your story has a divine architecture drawn by unseen hands. The voice of heaven restores memory to the soul. It reminds you that before time began, there was a design, and that design included you. The distractions that once drowned the whisper of God begin to fade when the true voice is restored. The noise that ruled your days begins to lose power, for no sound can compete with the resonance of divine truth. When God commands the restoration of His voice, He does not merely speak to be heard, He speaks to create. Every word that leaves His mouth carries the power to bring forth what it declares. So when the voice of heaven is restored, it doesn't just bring revelation, it brings manifestation. The barren heart begins to bloom. The closed spirit begins to open. The weary soul begins to rise. The frequency of God carries not only truth but transformation. The voice of heaven does not inform, it reforms. It reshapes the inner world of those who receive it. The voice of heaven carries a purity that nothing of earth can imitate. It does not flatter or condemn. It reveals. It unveils what is hidden, both the darkness that must be healed and the light that must be released. When you hear it, there is no confusion, no uncertainty. It is the sound of home. It is the recognition of origin, and though it may pass through human lips or written words, its essence is unmistakably divine. When heaven speaks, your spirit knows, even if your mind cannot explain it. It bypasses the need for logic and awakens faith. It pierces through doubt and speaks directly to destiny. When the voice of heaven is restored, it marks the end of wandering. Many have walked through seasons of silence, wondering if God had forgotten them, questioning if the heavens were closed. But silence is not absence, It is preparation. The delay was not punishment, but process, for the human heart must be tuned before it can bear the sound of divine truth. When heaven's voice returns, it finds the soul that has been softened through struggle and made humble through waiting. The soil of suffering becomes fertile ground for revelation, and in that readiness the voice comes not as thunder to destroy, but as light to reveal. There is a majesty in that restored voice, one that carries authority and compassion in equal measure. It does not demand your attention, it draws it. It does not strike fear into the heart that loves truth, it brings peace that surpasses understanding. The very tone of heaven carries healing. It speaks into wounds you didn't know still bled. It fills the hollow spaces left by disappointment and restores courage where fear once lived. Every syllable that proceeds from heaven's mouth has the ability to realign what is broken. The voice that spoke galaxies into motion speaks now into your spirit with the same creative force, saying, "Rise, remember, return." When heaven's transmission is restored, it does not come for the masses alone, it comes for the one who will hear. God's word may echo across the universe, but it seeks a heart that will respond. It is not content to remain sound, it desires to become seed. And when that seed lands on the soil of a willing spirit, it grows into vision, strength, and faith. You begin to see differently, hear differently, live differently. The restoration of heaven's voice does not only reveal God's, it reveals your role in it. There is a moment, often quiet and unseen, when the soul realizes that heaven's voice has never truly been gone. It was waiting for permission to be heard again. It was waiting for the heart to grow still enough to recognize it. The voice of God has never ceased to echo through creation, but humanity must choose to attune itself once more. When that choice is made, when the heart surrenders its noise and opens its gates, the sound of heaven floods in like light through glass. The restoration of heaven's voice is not an event to witness, it is a reality to enter. When the divine message is restored, it carries a sacred urgency not of fear, but of awakening. It comes to remind the living of who they are and what they have been entrusted to do. It is the voice that calls the weary to rise, the broken to believe, the lost to come home. It carries not only revelation but instruction, to see beyond what is seen, to trust beyond what is felt, to remember beyond what was forgotten. The sound of heaven is the key that unlocks every chain of confusion and opens the inner gate where glory resides. The restoration of heaven's voice is not for admiration but for transformation. It is the eternal sound returning to its rightful place within creation. It reestablishes divine order in hearts that had grown silent and reminds every soul that the distance between heaven and earth is not measured in miles but in surrender. When that surrender comes, the voice flows unhindered, pure, commanding, alive, the very breath of God made audible once more. 3 times heaven's transmission was interrupted, and each time the interference came not from the silence of God, but from the turbulence within and around the human heart. When the divine speaks, its voice travels through eternity without error or distortion, but on earth, the reception depends on the condition of the listener. The signal was never lost, it was resisted, clouded, muffled by forces both seen and unseen. Each interruption carried a lesson, a revelation about the nature of faith, the endurance of truth, and the battle between light and darkness that surrounds every soul chosen to hear heaven's message. The first interruption was the noise of the world. It began when the message descended like a whisper from eternity, clear and perfect, but before it could reach the heart, it collided with the chaos of human distraction. The world is filled with voices endless, demanding, restless, the voice of ambition that tells you to chase what fades, the voice of fear that chains you to hesitation, the voice of pleasure that numbs you to purpose, the voice of pride that blinds you to grace. Each voice clamors for attention until the spirit becomes overwhelmed, unable to discern what is divine from what is temporary. The message from heaven tried to speak, but the heart was tuned to lower frequencies, to news, noise, and need. It wasn't that God was silent, it was that the world was too loud. In that first interruption, The human soul forgot that revelation requires stillness. Heaven's language is not shouted, it is perceived through peace. The one who would hear must first quiet the storm within. The world teaches the ear to chase noise, but heaven teaches the heart to find silence. When the first interruption came, it revealed how easily humanity trades the eternal for the immediate, how quickly we fill the silence that was meant for divine communion with the clutter of endless distractions. And so, the message hovered not lost, but waiting for a heart that would grow still enough to receive it. The second interruption came not from without, but from within. This time, the message drew near, but doubt rose like a fortress around the heart. Doubt is not simply disbelief. It is the refusal to accept what feels too holy for human understanding. When the message reached the threshold of your soul, a voice inside whispered, "Surely this cannot be for me." You questioned your worthiness, your readiness, your right to receive something so sacred. You remembered your failures, your sins, your flaws, and decided that heaven's voice was meant for someone better, someone purer, someone who hadn't fallen as far as you had. But heaven's messages are not earned, they are given. They are sent not to the perfect, but to the willing. Yet doubt, with its subtle power, convinced you to close the door. That second interruption was not merely hesitation. It was spiritual self-sabotage. You mistook humility for rejection, thinking that to shrink back was to honor God, when in truth it was to resist Him. Heaven's voice does not seek perfection, it seeks openness. The divine message tried to enter, but the walls of self-condemnation stood firm. You thought, if God truly knew who I am, He would not send such a word. But He did know, and that is why He sent it. The interruption revealed the battle between divine truth and human insecurity, a war waged in every heart that struggles to believe it is loved beyond measure. The message remained suspended in grace, waiting for the moment when faith would finally rise above the noise of self-doubt. The third interruption came from a darker source. This time, the resistance did not come from human distraction or inner insecurity, it came from opposition itself, from the forces that dwell in the shadows and tremble at the sound of truth. When the message began its descent once more, the spiritual atmosphere thickened. There was warfare unseen, a clash between light and darkness over the delivery of divine revelation. For every word that heaven sends carries creative power. It can awaken, heal, restore, and realign. And the adversary knows that once truth is received, chains are broken. So interference was sent, not in thunder or violence, but in subtle confusion, in sudden fatigue, in the quiet discouragement that makes the soul feel unworthy to listen. This third interruption was a battle for transmission. Heaven's message stood at the gates of your heart, surrounded by resistance. Angels moved, boundaries were challenged, and still the decree of God remained unchanged. The words spoken from His throne cannot return void. The darkness tried to delay, but it could not deny. The command came forth, open the gate, and in that moment heaven's power broke through the obstruction. The transmission that had been hindered 3 times was released, unstoppable and pure, flowing like light through the fractures of human resistance. Each interruption served a purpose. The first revealed the power of worldly distraction and the need for stillness. The second exposed the wounds of self-doubt and the necessity of faith. The third unveiled the spiritual opposition that always rises when heaven draws near. Together, they formed a pattern, 3 layers of resistance that every soul must overcome to hear the unfiltered voice of God. The restoration of the message required alignment in body, soul, and spirit. The ears had to turn from the world's noise, the heart had to rise above insecurity, and the spirit had to stand firm against the unseen enemy. Only then could the signal flow freely. When the interruptions were finally overcome, something shifted in the unseen realms. The heavens grew clear, the atmosphere purified, and what had been delayed began to move swiftly. The voice that had been restrained was now amplified. The command from the throne went forth with authority not whispered, but declared, let them see it. Those words carried the force of divine permission. What had been hidden was now to be revealed. What had been withheld was now to be released. Heaven's intention was no longer merely to speak, but to manifest. In that moment of restoration, the soul realized that the interruptions had not been failures, but preparation. Each delay had refined the listener, stripped away distraction, pride, and fear, until only the willing heart remained. Heaven's timing is never late, it is exact. The message was not denied, it was preserved for the moment of readiness. When the transmission was finally received, it entered not as mere words, but as living fire. The same power that once spoke the stars into existence now spoke into your being, and what was dormant awoke. The interruptions had done their work. The world's noise had taught the need for silence. Doubt had taught the necessity of faith. Darkness had revealed the strength of light, and now the voice that once seemed distant became as near as breath. The divine frequency no longer echoed from beyond the clouds, it resonated within the soul itself. Heaven had not been trying to reach you. It had been waiting for you to align, to rise, to remember that you were always part of the conversation. The 3 interruptions are not merely history, they are symbols of the human journey. Every soul that seeks truth will face them. The distractions of the world that blur divine focus, the inner doubts that whisper unworthiness, the invisible resistance that opposes revelation. Yet for every barrier, heaven has an answer. The world's noise is silenced by stillness. Doubt is dissolved by love. Darkness is defeated by decree. And when the decree comes, open the gate, nothing can hold back what was meant to reach you. The voice that was delayed has now arrived, and it carries the memory of every battle it overcame. It is stronger, clearer, purer than before, because it has passed through fire and storm to reach the one it was meant for. You are that one. The message belongs to you. It was written through interruption so that when you finally heard it, you would understand the cost of its journey and the depth of its purpose. The 3 interruptions did not weaken heaven's message, they magnified its glory. The breaking of the seal was not a moment of noise, but of divine authority. In the unseen realm, there are decrees that mark the shift of ages, commands that cannot be revoked once they leave the mouth of God. When he said, open the gate, heaven obeyed instantly, for every celestial being knows that the word of the Eternal is not suggestion but law. The seal that had kept the message hidden was not placed there by accident. It was positioned in divine timing. Some truths are too heavy to be revealed before the heart is strong enough to carry them. Some revelations must be sealed until the soul is ready to behold what lies beyond the veil. When the appointed moment came, the sound of that seal breaking echoed through realms unseen, and heaven's transmission, long delayed, poured forth like a river long restrained. The seal existed not as punishment, but as protection. It kept the unprepared from misusing what was sacred. The power behind the message was too holy to be handled carelessly, so it was sealed under divine watch until the time of unveiling. Every delay, every silence, every unanswered longing was a layer of refinement preparing the heart to receive. When God said, open the gate, it was not because he had finally decided to speak, it was because the listener had finally become ready to hear. The seal broke not from external force, but from internal readiness. Heaven responds to alignment, not desperation. When the heart is tuned to heaven's frequency, what once seemed locked away begins to open with ease, as though it had been waiting for that very vibration. In the moment of the seal's breaking, the atmosphere shifted. The invisible became near, the distant became present. The word that had been hovering above suddenly descended, full of light and power, alive with divine intention. The gate of heaven is not a physical barrier, but a dimension of access. It opens where faith and obedience meet, where the soul surrenders the need to understand and chooses instead to trust. When God commands the gate to open, it signifies that the distance between the divine and the human has been bridged. The barrier that once separated has been lifted, and communication flows freely between heaven and earth. When the seal broke, it was not only heaven that moved, creation itself responded. The wind carried a different weight, the air pulsed with unseen energy, and the spirit within you felt the tremor of eternity pressing close. The breaking of a divine seal always comes with spiritual recognition. Something ancient within you awakens, something placed there before time began. It is as if the soul remembers its true origin and recognizes the sound of home. Every barrier that once seemed unbreakable suddenly loses power, for nothing can resist the command of the Almighty when He has declared, let it be opened. There is mystery in the breaking of divine seals. They do not shatter through human effort. They open through divine permission. Many try to force revelation before its time, seeking to pry open what God has sealed, but such efforts lead only to confusion. True revelation is not achieved, it is received. The opening of the gate is not the result of striving but surrender. When God broke the seal, He was not responding to the noise of petitions, but to the posture of the heart. A surrendered spirit creates an opening that no force of darkness can close. The command open the gate was not only for heaven to release, but for your spirit to receive. The sound of that command carries a resonance unlike any other. It is both gentle and unyielding, full of peace yet charged with the power of creation. When God speaks those words, every resistance trembles. The same authority that once spoke, let there be light, now speaks again, releasing light into your spirit. The gate that opens is not only the gate of heaven, it is also the gate within the door of the heart that guards the deepest part of the soul. The divine decree reaches inward, touching the places long closed by fear, pain, and unbelief. It unlocks them not by force, but by love so powerful that no wall can endure it. The breaking of the seal brings with it a release of revelation. What was hidden begins to unfold layer by layer. Mysteries that once seemed beyond understanding become clear, not through human reasoning but through spiritual illumination. The mind does not grasp it, the spirit absorbs it. The message that was sealed is not a set of words but a living presence. When the gate opens, it is as though light itself enters you, filling every darkened place with awareness of truth. The revelation is not learned, it is known, as if it had always been there, waiting to be remembered. When God opens a gate, He does so with purpose. Every release in heaven is attached to an assignment on earth. The breaking of the seal is both invitation and commission. The message that flows through the open gate is not given for curiosity, but for transformation. It carries instruction, correction, empowerment. It does not merely inform you of divine will, it draws you into it. You become part of the message, a living vessel through which heaven manifests its decree. The voice that once spoke to you now begins to speak through you. The open gate allows not only divine revelation to enter, but also divine power to flow outward. The breaking of the seal also marks the defeat of opposition. What once stood in the way of revelation can no longer resist. The powers that tried to hold the message back lose authority in the presence of divine command. The enemy may attempt to intercept, delay, or distort, but he cannot undo what God has decreed. Once the seal is broken, the flow cannot be reversed. The word of God runs swiftly, accomplishing what it was sent to do. The breaking of the seal is a declaration of victory, not a battle to be fought, but a triumph already secured. The moment of opening releases not only revelation, but restoration. The parts of your spirit that had grown weary from waiting suddenly come alive. The faith that once flickered weakly begins to blaze again. The heart feels the breath of heaven move through it, like wind through a newly opened window. What was once heavy becomes light. What was once silent begins to sing. The divine energy that flows through the open gate carries renewal. It reorders what had fallen into chaos and heals what had been fractured by delay. The breaking of the seal also signifies divine trust. God does not open gates to those who treat revelation lightly. He opens them to those who have endured the silence, who have remained faithful through the waiting, who have allowed refinement to do its work. To be entrusted with an open gate is to be entrusted with responsibility. The message you receive is not for display but for destiny. Heaven opens what it intends for you to carry, and the weight of that glory demands humility. The seal was not broken merely to satisfy curiosity, but to ignite calling. When the command opened the gate, went forth, it did not just remove a barrier, it restored relationship. It signaled that the distance between heaven and earth had been bridged again. It meant that the divine conversation could resume without interference. You were never meant to live behind walls of silence. You were meant to walk in continuous communion with the source of all life. The breaking of the seal reestablishes that connection. It allows heaven's current to flow freely through your spirit, reminding you that revelation is not an event but a state of alignment. Every time heaven breaks a seal, something irreversible happens. The truth revealed cannot be unseen, the voice heard cannot be forgotten, the gate opened cannot be closed again by human hand. It is a turning point in the spiritual landscape, a divine moment that separates what was from what will be. When God opens, no one can shut. When he releases, no one can restrain. The breaking of the seal is the signal that the waiting has ended and that the season of fulfillment has begun. The message that once lingered beyond reach now flows freely, alive with the breath of the one who sent it, transforming everything it touches with the light of divine purpose. The personal call of heaven is unlike any sound known to man because it is not carried by words alone. It is carried by essence. It moves beyond language, beyond intellect, and beyond emotion. It touches the core of who you are, the part of you that existed before time, before pain, before memory. When God speaks directly to you, the voice does not come from somewhere above. It rises from within, awakening what has been silent, summoning what has been sleeping. It is not a general call meant for a crowd. It is precise, deliberate, and deeply intimate. Every syllable is inscribed with your identity. Every vibration resonates with your name as heaven knows it. This message, though vast enough to fill the universe, is shaped perfectly to fit only your soul. The personal call is not about recognition in the eyes of men. It is about recognition in the heart of heaven. God does not call you because of what you have achieved, but because of what he placed inside you before the foundation of the world. This message bears the fingerprint of divine intention. It carries your assignment, your alignment, your hidden design. You are not an accident of creation. You are a note in the eternal symphony of God's plan, and the moment the call reaches you, that note begins to resonate again. The soul that once felt disoriented begins to remember its origin. You begin to sense that you are not lost, you are simply waiting for the sound that matches your true frequency. When the personal call comes, it does not arrive through thunder or spectacle. It often comes as a quiet knowing, a stirring deep within that cannot be silenced. It may come through a word, a dream, a whisper in prayer, or a sudden clarity that pierces confusion like light through darkness. And when it does, something shifts. You can no longer pretend you do not know. You can no longer hide behind the noise or the excuses that once shielded you. The personal call demands acknowledgement. It marks the soul with divine awareness, and though others around you may not understand it, you know something holy has been spoken, and it was meant for you. This call is not random, nor is it shared. It belongs to no one else because no one else carries your exact pattern of destiny. Heaven does not recycle callings. Each one is unique. The message that reaches you is encoded with your specific purpose, your specific timing, and your specific journey. To ignore it is to silence the reason for your existence. The call may seem small at first, a nudge, a thought, a longing that refuses to leave, but it grows, expands, and begins to consume everything that is not aligned with it. It will not compete with distractions forever. It waits for surrender. Once you yield to it, it transforms from a whisper into a fire that cannot be quenched. Many spend years searching for purpose, while the call of heaven has already been speaking. The problem is not the absence of calling, but the presence of resistance. Fear disguises itself as logic. comfort masquerades as peace. The personal call often disrupts what feels safe. It leads you into places that challenge the old self and demand trust beyond what sight can confirm. But that is the nature of divine summons. It draws you out of limitation and into destiny. It does not ask for your permission to exist. It asks for your willingness to respond. The voice does not chase, it invites. The call of heaven is patient, yet it does not fade. It remains echoing softly until you decide to answer. When the call is received, it redefines identity. You begin to see yourself not through the eyes of failure, nor through the opinions of others, but through the reflection of divine intention. You realize that the one who created galaxies also crafted you with precision, and the same authority that governs stars has spoken your name. The moment you receive that revelation, the chains of comparison begin to break. You stop trying to be like anyone else because you finally understand the message was not broadcast to the world. It was sent directly to you. Heaven's tone, when directed personally, carries the weight of belonging. It tells you that you are known completely, seen entirely, and chosen intentionally. The personal call also carries responsibility. To be called is to be trusted. God does not send messages into empty vessels. He sends them into those he intends to fill with purpose. When heaven says, "this belongs to you," it is both gift and commission. The message is not meant to sit within you like a treasure hidden in sand. It is meant to flow through you as a river of transformation. You become a conduit through which heaven reaches others, not because you are perfect, but because you are willing. The call personalizes the mission. It makes obedience not a duty but a desire. The personal call is also marked by testing. Once received, it will be challenged not to break you but to strengthen your resolve. Doubt will whisper, "You imagined it." Circumstances will suggest, "You misunderstood it." The world will mock, "You are not qualified for it." But the one who has truly heard the voice of God cannot be convinced otherwise. The sound of heaven imprints itself upon the soul. Even when silence follows, the echo remains. It becomes your compass in uncertainty, your anchor in storms. The same voice that called you is the same voice that sustains you when the path becomes dark. This message that belongs only to you also carries divine timing. God does not reveal calling without preparing opportunity. The personal call aligns with moments in time that only he can orchestrate. What may seem delayed is not denial, it is alignment. Heaven's timing is never rushed because its purpose is eternal. When God finally says, "now," doors open that no human effort could have forced. The message unfolds in phases, each one building upon the last, until the fullness of the assignment is revealed. The one who has heard must walk by faith, trusting that the same voice that began the call will complete it. There is a sacred intimacy in realizing that heaven has spoken specifically to you. It humbles and empowers at once. You feel small in the presence of divine greatness, yet immense in the awareness that God chose you as a vessel of his message. You begin to walk differently, not with arrogance, but with assurance. You carry within you something that did not originate from earth, and that awareness changes how you see everything. The mundane becomes holy. The ordinary becomes significant. Every step, every choice, every breath becomes part of a divine conversation continuing between your soul and heaven. This message that bears your name will not leave you unchanged. Once you have heard it, you cannot return to who you were. The call separates the seasons of your life before you heard it and after. It awakens courage where fear once lived, clarity where confusion reigned, and conviction where hesitation lingered. The call becomes the compass of your spirit, always pointing you toward divine purpose, no matter how the winds of life may blow. Even in moments of silence, the memory of the voice remains alive within you, guiding you, shaping you, pulling you toward the destiny it declared. This personal call is not merely an invitation to believe, it is a command to become. It is the moment heaven affirms your existence with purpose and your soul responds with surrender. The call does not merely tell you what to do, It reminds you of who you are, a chosen vessel carrying a message written in eternity, meant for this exact moment in time. The words asterisk, "This message belongs to you and no one else," asterisk are not poetic, they are truth. They signify divine ownership, heavenly intention, and eternal design. What God has spoken over you cannot be transferred, replicated, or erased. It is sealed with the breath of the Almighty, and when it enters your heart, all of heaven stands behind it, waiting for your yes. The gate within the heart is not made of stone or iron, yet it is stronger than both. It is invisible to the eye, but it is the most guarded threshold in all of creation. It is there that heaven meets humanity, where eternity whispers into the mortal soul, and where divine truth finds its passage into the realm of flesh and breath. Every human being carries this gate, though many live their entire lives unaware of it. It is not a structure that can be seen, but a reality that can be felt, a sacred doorway placed within by the Creator Himself. Through it flows every divine message, every spark of revelation, every stirring of conscience, every breath of inspiration. When God speaks, His voice does not travel through the air, it travels through this gate. When He calls, He does not reach the ears first, He reaches the heart, yet the gate can be closed. Fear, pain, pride, disappointment, and disbelief act as locks that seal it shut. Some hearts have been sealed by betrayal, others by sorrow so deep it turned hope into silence. There are hearts that built walls for protection and ended up imprisoning themselves within. There are those who have seen too much cruelty to trust that heaven still speaks, and so they bar the gate, thinking it will keep them safe from disappointment. But the truth is that every closed heart becomes a silent heaven. The voice of God never ceases to speak, but a closed gate cannot hear. It is not heaven that grows distant, it is the heart that drifts into shadow, unable to receive what is already being given. When God commanded, open the gate, He was not speaking to a distant city or to the clouds above. He was speaking to the heart itself. The gate within you responds to His voice because it was made by that same voice. It remembers the tone that once called it into being, and when the Creator speaks again, the gate trembles. You feel it as conviction, as longing, as sudden awareness that something divine is pressing close. Heaven does not break the gate open, it calls it to open from within. The locks do not yield to force, they yield to willingness. The gate opens not through might, but through surrender. The heart's gate is the most sacred place of meeting between the human and the divine. It is where revelation becomes realization, where truth transforms from theory into life. When the gate opens, light enters not only as knowledge but as power. You begin to perceive not with your eyes, but with your spirit. The things that once seemed distant begin to draw near. You start to sense that heaven is not somewhere far away, it has always been close, waiting for the door to be unsealed. The presence that once felt unreachable now fills the inner chambers of your being, and the silence that once felt empty becomes alive with divine breath. The process of opening this gate often begins with pain. Pain softens what pride has hardened. It makes the heart tender again, vulnerable enough to listen. Sometimes heaven allows breaking so that the gate can be reached. The cracks in your soul become the openings through which light enters. The tears you thought were signs of weakness become the very rain that washes the dust from the gate's hinges. Every sorrow you have endured has not been meaningless, it has been preparing you to open. Heaven never wastes suffering. What feels like loss in the natural often serves as unlocking in the spiritual. When the gate within the heart begins to open, the first thing that enters is light, and the second is truth. Light reveals what has been hidden, truth heals what has been wounded. The entrance of light exposes shadows that have long ruled unchallenged fear, bitterness, unbelief, the subtle lies that whispered you were unworthy. These cannot stand in the radiance of divine presence. The heart begins to change shape, no longer defined by pain but by purpose. The more the gate opens, the more heaven's frequency can flow through you. Peace begins to replace anxiety, clarity replaces confusion, love replaces resentment. The heart that was once a battlefield becomes a sanctuary. Opening the gate also means surrendering control. The gatekeeper, your will must step aside and let God enter as he desires. Many try to open the gate on their own terms, allowing heaven only into the outer courts while keeping the deeper chambers locked, but the divine presence seeks total access. It will not force entry, it waits for invitation. True opening requires trust that what enters is not there to harm, but to heal. The moment you release the illusion of control, the flood begins. It is not chaos that comes, but divine order. Every thought, every emotion, every memory starts to realign under the authority of the one who created you. The gate within is also a threshold of transformation. Once it opens, what flows out of you becomes as significant as what flows in. Heaven does not enter the heart to remain contained. It enters to overflow. The open gate turns your life into a vessel of divine expression. Words spoken from such a heart carry healing. Actions born from such a heart carry authority. The presence within becomes visible without. You begin to live not as one seeking heaven, but as one through whom heaven moves. The line between the divine and the human blurs because your heart has become a conduit of the eternal. The enemy of your soul knows the power of this gate. That is why he wars so fiercely to keep it closed. He sends distractions to fill your mind, wounds to harden your spirit, and guilt to make you feel unworthy of divine visitation. But every attempt of darkness is powerless once you choose to open. The key to the gate has always been within you: faith. Faith is not mere belief, it is the act of unlocking. When you believe that God desires to dwell within you, the lock gives way. The gate opens and heaven rushes in, not as a visitor but as a resident. The heart, once open, becomes illuminated with understanding that cannot be learned. Revelation flows like living water. You begin to discern what is unseen, to sense divine timing, to perceive truth without argument. The heart becomes the meeting place of dimensions earth and heaven intertwined there, and every moment spent in that presence reshapes the very essence of who you are. The world outside may remain chaotic, but within, a kingdom stands unshaken. To keep the gate open requires vigilance. The world will always try to pull it shut again through cynicism, fear, and disappointment. Every day becomes an act of keeping the gate unbarred. Prayer is not the knocking at heaven's door. It is the keeping of your own door open to heaven. Gratitude oils the hinges. Forgiveness cleanses the threshold. Love keeps the passage clear. The more often you open the gate, the easier it becomes. What once felt difficult turns natural, for the heart learns to recognize the rhythm of heaven's call. The gate within is not only personal but eternal. It is the place where divine purpose flows into time. Every miracle, every calling, every revelation begins when this inner door swings wide. The same voice that said, "let them see it," speaks now within, urging the soul to behold what has been waiting just beyond the threshold. The light that enters through the gate does not merely illuminate, it transforms. It changes not only perception but reality. What enters your heart from heaven eventually manifests in your life on earth. This gate is your sacred inheritance, the meeting place between your Creator and your created self. It was designed not to remain closed, but to remain open, a continual communion between spirit and spirit. It is the inner sanctuary, where heaven's currents move freely, where divine wisdom flows without interruption, and where your truest self finally awakens. When you live with this gate open, you no longer seek the presence of God as something external. You carry it, you breathe it, you become the living expression of it. The same gate through which heaven enters your heart becomes the same one through which heaven touches the world through you. When heaven opens the gate and declares, "let them see it," what unfolds is not a vision made for the eyes, but for the spirit. It is not an image projected into the mind, but a revelation imprinted upon the soul. To see, in the language of heaven, means to perceive truth beyond appearance, to discern what lies beneath the surface of the visible world, to awaken to what has always been present but hidden. It is to behold with the inner sight that transcends the boundaries of matter and time. This kind of sight does not come from study, nor from effort. It comes as a gift from the divine, released only when the heart is prepared to receive it. For some, this unveiling comes suddenly, like the parting of clouds after a long storm. For others, it unfolds gradually, like dawn rising inch by inch over the horizon of the soul. To see is to be transformed, because divine revelation does not merely inform, it recreates. When heaven says, let them see it, it is not granting permission to witness, but commanding transformation through vision. What you see in the Spirit has power to reshape how you think, how you feel, and how you walk. The revelation you are shown is not meant to remain as a distant wonder. It is meant to become a living reality within you. God does not show you things to impress your understanding, but to awaken your calling. Every unveiling carries purpose. Every glimpse of divine truth is an invitation to alignment. What you behold in the light must then be lived in the world of shadows. The divine unveiling is both a gift and a test. When heaven opens your eyes, it also tests your capacity to carry what you have seen. There are visions that shatter complacency, revelations that demand responsibility, insights that rearrange the entire structure of belief. To see is to become accountable. Once you have seen the truth, you cannot return to blindness without consequence. The one who sees must now walk in greater awareness. The revelation becomes a fire within you, burning through illusions, exposing the motives of the heart, separating what is eternal from what is temporary. Seeing is not comfort, it is commission. It pulls you out of the ordinary and thrusts you into divine reality. The world you once knew begins to fade as the unseen world becomes more vivid. What you once considered solid starts to appear fragile compared to the weight of eternal truth. The things that once consumed your energy, fear, pride, competition, self-preservation, lose their power when you see them for what they truly are, temporary shadows cast by a fleeting world. You begin to discern that everything visible is merely a reflection of what is invisible. You realize that the movements of earth are but echoes of the decrees of heaven. To see as heaven sees is to live in the rhythm of divine order, where nothing is random, and every event, no matter how small, fits into a grand orchestration that stretches beyond human comprehension. The unveiling is also deeply personal. Heaven does not show everyone the same thing. Revelation is tailored to purpose. What you are shown corresponds to what you are called to carry. God reveals to you the part of His design that aligns with your assignment. Some are shown visions of healing, others of justice, others of mercy, others of truth. Each revelation is a piece of the eternal mosaic. You are not meant to understand it all, only the part entrusted to you. To compare what you see with what another has seen is to misunderstand the nature of divine vision. Heaven is not limited to one perspective. Its vastness is too great for a single vessel. That is why the revelations differ not in truth, but in expression. When the unveiling begins, the human mind struggles to comprehend what the Spirit perceives. It tries to translate eternal light into language, and much is lost in the process. The eyes of the body may see only symbols, flashes of imagery, impressions, or words, yet within those symbols lies infinite meaning. Divine truth speaks in layers. It cannot be grasped all at once. The revelation grows as you grow, deepens as you deepen. What you saw yesterday reveals new dimensions tomorrow. Heaven's light is not static, it moves. It unfolds like the petals of an eternal flower, revealing new beauty with every breath of surrender. This unveiling also brings awareness of contrast, the brilliance of heaven against the dimness of earth. The one who sees becomes acutely aware of how dark the world truly is, not with condemnation, but with compassion. You begin to perceive how lost humanity is without divine illumination. The unveiling does not create arrogance, it creates humility, for once you have seen even a glimpse of divine glory, you realize how little you truly know. You fall silent in awe, knowing that the smallest fragment of heaven's light contains more wisdom than all the libraries of man. You stop boasting in knowledge and begin yearning for communion. Seeing does not inflate the ego, it dissolves it. When heaven says, let them see it, it is a declaration that the time of blindness is over. It is a moment of divine permission. The scales fall from the eyes, and the spirit perceives what was once hidden. But seeing also means stepping into new warfare. The enemy fears those who see, because vision destroys deception. Darkness thrives on confusion and ignorance, but revelation exposes its schemes. Once you see, you cannot be easily deceived. You begin to recognize falsehood even when it disguises itself in light. Your discernment sharpens, your spirit becomes alert, and you learn to distinguish between the sound of truth and the noise of illusion. Seeing empowers you to stand in clarity while others stumble in uncertainty. The unveiling is not a privilege for the elite, it is the inheritance of the willing. Heaven reveals itself not to the proud, but to the humble. The eyes that are open are those washed by tears of surrender. The revelation comes not to those who demand it, but to those who wait for it. The light of heaven does not invade, it invites. It comes when the heart is positioned in reverence, when the spirit is quiet enough to perceive the whisper behind the thunder. The unveiling happens in moments of stillness, in sacred silence where words cease and the soul listens. To see what heaven reveals is also to remember what your spirit already knew. The revelation is not entirely new, it is recognition. It awakens memory, the remembrance of truth buried deep within your being since before you were born. When you see, you are not learning something foreign, you are recalling something eternal. The revelation connects the fragments of your existence to their divine origin. Suddenly, purpose makes sense. The pain, the waiting, the unanswered questions all find meaning in the light of what has been shown. The unveiling restores order to chaos, coherence to confusion, and direction to wandering. When heaven opens your sight, you no longer live merely by reaction, you live by revelation. You stop chasing signs because you have become a sign yourself. The light that enters through vision becomes light that emanates from within you. You begin to walk in awareness of divine movement, when to speak, when to act, when to wait. The unveiling is not an event to be remembered, it is a state to be maintained. It transforms your perception until you no longer separate the sacred from the ordinary. You see the fingerprints of God in every breath, every face, every moment. The veil between heaven and earth grows thin, and life becomes worship. Those who have been allowed to see must protect the purity of their vision. Revelation can be distorted when filtered through pride or fear. That is why humility must guard it, and prayer must sustain it. To see is to be entrusted with holy fire, it must not be mishandled. Every vision demands interpretation guided by the Spirit, not by human reasoning. Divine sight must always lead to divine obedience. Seeing is not for fascination but for transformation. And so when heaven declares, let them see it, the veil is lifted and a new reality dawns. The one who was blind to divine order begins to walk as one awakened. The spiritual eyes once veiled by distraction now behold the movements of eternity. The unseen becomes visible, and the hidden becomes known. This is not imagination, but revelation, not fantasy, but fulfillment. The call to see is the call to live with unveiled perception, to carry the light of heaven in every step, and to become the embodiment of the truth that has been revealed within the soul. When heaven declares that this message belongs to you and no one else, it is not a statement of possession as the world understands it. It is an affirmation of divine assignment. In the vast design of creation, where every soul is crafted with precision and purpose, there are words, revelations, and callings that bear your specific signature. They do not belong to another because they were not spoken into their spirit. They were breathed into yours. The tone of the message matches the rhythm of your heartbeat, the structure of your soul, the pattern of your destiny. It cannot be imitated, transferred, or stolen, because its origin and its destination are both tied to your identity in the mind of God. The message was written for you before time began, inscribed into your spiritual DNA, waiting for the appointed moment when heaven would speak the words, *now. Divine messages are not generic. They are living entities, seeds of light containing intention and power. When heaven speaks, it sends forth revelation not merely to inform but to transform, to awaken the dormant design within you that was placed there for this exact hour. This message, the one that bears your name, finds resonance only in you because it was shaped by your experiences, your tears, your battles, your prayers. What may sound like simple words to another carries holy fire for you. It stirs remembrance of who you were before the world named you, before fear diminished you, before time tried to define you. Heaven's message comes not to introduce something foreign, but to call forth what was hidden, the divine self waiting beneath the layers of survival and pain. The uniqueness of this message means that its comprehension is also personal. No one else can fully interpret what God has spoken into your spirit, because no one else stands where you stand. The same words that others might read as ordinary become revelation when they touch your heart, because they pass through the prism of your purpose. The divine language adapts itself to the vessel. Heaven speaks to each soul in the dialect it understands. That is why the message meant for you will never truly settle in another. It will move through others as inspiration, but within you it will burn as transformation. It will feel as if heaven itself has whispered directly into your being, awakening something ancient, something sacred, something unbreakable. This exclusivity does not make the message selfish, it makes it sacred. Heaven's dealings are deeply personal because God does not create duplicates. You are not a repetition of someone else's idea. You are an original expression of divine intent. Therefore, the revelation entrusted to you cannot be fulfilled by another. If you do not carry it, it will remain unmanifested in the earth until heaven raises another generation. But even then, it will not carry the same fragrance, the same tone, the same alignment. What is meant for you cannot be replaced without loss. Heaven's economy values uniqueness. Every calling, every vision, every divine word fits into an intricate design where nothing is wasted and nothing is random. When you receive the message meant only for you, it feels both familiar and overwhelming. Familiar because deep within, your spirit recognizes it. Overwhelming because your flesh struggles to contain it. It carries weight, not the heaviness of burden, but the gravity of purpose. You feel its pressure in your chest, its fire in your bones. You cannot ignore it, no matter how you try. You may attempt to silence it with distractions, drown it with busyness, or delay it with excuses, but it will not fade. It will pursue you through every season, for heaven does not retract what it has assigned. The message waits patiently for the moment when your heart and will align with its call. Many feel the echo of a message but never embrace it, fearing its cost. To receive what belongs to you often requires letting go of what does not. The divine word will separate you from imitation, from comfort, from the approval of the crowd. It will call you into solitude, because clarity often comes in silence. The message belongs to you, but it will cost you your complacency. It will not allow you to live in half-truths or shallow faith. Once heaven entrusts you with revelation, it demands that you become the living testimony of it. The message will shape your life until your existence becomes its embodiment. You will not just speak it, you will be it. The uniqueness of this message also means it carries a unique warfare. Every divine revelation attracts resistance because it threatens darkness. What is entrusted to you will be tested. Circumstances will arise to contradict it, voices will arise to mock it, doubt will attempt to distort it. But no attack can nullify what was sealed in heaven. The authenticity of the message does not depend on the approval of others, but on the authority of its source. Even when misunderstood or opposed, the word within you remains alive. It may seem dormant, but it never dies. It carries within itself the power of fulfillment, waiting for the moment when faith activates it again. There are seasons when the message will feel like both a gift and a weight. You may question why it was given to you and not another, but heaven's assignments are never misplaced. You were chosen not because you were the most qualified, but because you were the most shaped for it. The valleys you walked through, the storms you survived, the tears you shed all became preparation. The message belongs to you because your life has been its soil. Every trial softened the ground for its seed. Every wound carved space for its light. You are not merely the recipient of revelation. You are its vessel, its carrier, its manifestation in human form. To recognize that this message is yours is to take responsibility for its expression. Heaven's words are living scrolls waiting to be read by the world through your life. The message within you is not meant to remain a secret. It is meant to become sound, action, transformation. The way you walk, speak, love, forgive, and believe becomes the way heaven's message is transmitted through you. You become the translation of divine thought into human experience. To live in alignment with your message is to live in constant communion with the one who gave it. Yet there is a sacred intimacy in knowing that among billions, heaven spoke something only you were meant to carry. It is both humbling and empowering. It silences comparison, for what belongs to you cannot belong to another. You no longer envy what others carry because you understand that each soul holds a different frequency of the divine. You learn to honor their message without doubting your own. Heaven's harmony requires many notes, and yours, though unique, contributes to the fullness of its sound. Sometimes the message will feel too great for your strength. In those moments, grace rises to sustain you. What belongs to you will not crush you. It will refine you. It will stretch your faith, purify your motives, and draw you closer to the heart of God. It will lead you into dependency on divine strength because only heaven can sustain what heaven has sent. The message belongs to you, but its power belongs to Him. You are the carrier, not the source. You are the voice, not the origin. Your obedience is the bridge between revelation and reality. When you finally accept that the message belongs to you, something shifts. You stop waiting for permission from the world and begin walking in authority from heaven. You no longer ask whether you are ready, because readiness is not a feeling but a response. You rise, carrying the fire placed within you, and wherever you go, the presence that entrusted you with the message moves through you. The earth begins to hear what heaven spoke long ago, not through thunder, not through lightning, but through the quiet strength of a life aligned with divine purpose. The message that belongs to you becomes not just something you hear, but something you are. And the world, through you, begins to encounter the voice that first called your name. When heaven declares that you must open this message with your heart prepared, it speaks not of readiness in the natural sense, but of a spiritual posture, a state of surrender, reverence, and trust. Preparation of the heart is not achieved through knowledge or ritual. It is achieved through alignment. It is the process of emptying what is false so that what is true may enter. To open the message without preparation is to handle holy fire with unsteady hands. The divine word is living and powerful, and when it descends, it requires a vessel capable of carrying its weight without distortion. A prepared heart is not a perfect heart. It is a yielded one. It is the heart that no longer argues with heaven but listens, no longer resists but receives, no longer strives but rests in obedience. Preparation begins in stillness. The heart must grow quiet enough to hear the whisper beneath the noise. Heaven speaks in tones that the hurried soul cannot detect. The world trains the mind to react, to reason, to analyze, but revelation requires stillness, not calculation. When the heart slows and silence settles, the spiritual ears open. It is there in that sacred stillness that God begins to shape the heart into a vessel ready to receive His word. He clears the clutter of distraction, dismantles pride, and purifies intention. Many pray for revelation, but few prepare the space to receive it. The divine message cannot rest in a heart divided between heaven and self. It demands singular devotion, a willingness to be reshaped by what is revealed. To prepare the heart is also to cleanse it. There are places within every soul where pain, bitterness, or fear have built altars. These must be torn down, for divine truth will not dwell alongside deception. Heaven's light exposes what the heart has hidden, the motives unspoken, the wounds unhealed, the attachments disguised as loyalties. It is not to condemn but to cleanse. The message cannot take root in soil hardened by resentment or poisoned by unbelief. The cleansing comes through repentance, not as shame, but as release. To repent is to make room. It is to remove the stones that block the flow of divine revelation. Once the heart is cleansed, it becomes soft again, able to feel what heaven feels and to receive what heaven sends. Preparation also means expectation. The heart that anticipates receives differently than the heart that doubts. Expectation creates atmosphere. When you approach the message believing that heaven has spoken directly to you, your faith draws revelation out of mystery. The divine word meets you at the level of your expectation. If you approach with indifference, you may hear only words, but if you approach with hunger, you will hear eternity speaking through them. Heaven always honors the expectant heart because faith is its native language. The prepared heart listens with anticipation, knowing that even a single syllable from God contains the power to transform